Hello, my friends, hello, and welcome once again to stately Vaughan Manor, and it's my weekend reading report. Oh, the excitement! What did I read this past week? Well, this past week wasn't bad, actually. I actually had some time to read for a change, thanks to the holiday, so I did get a couple things read. So let's talk about those things. So, first of all, I finally finished this first part of Varney the Vampire. This is the first part, which is actually the smaller part. This comes in 2 volumes, and this is the somewhat smaller volume. But still, I managed to complete it. Unfortunately, I started this before I started my 500 books challenge, so it doesn't count for the challenge, but still, it was pretty great, actually. I really enjoyed this. I'm surprised how entertaining this was. Now, it is a penny dreadful, and it suffers from all the things you would expect a penny dreadful to suffer from. Purple prose, just outlandish plot points, plot points being repeated over and over again, stretching things out to keep the story going. It's got all that going on, but it's really entertaining. And Varney is actually a pretty great character. So yeah, I enjoyed Varney the Vampire, the first part of it. So I've got the second part still to read, but I'm gonna wait a little while on that. I think I'm gonna wait possibly until I'm done with the Burroughs, the Edgar Rice Burroughs deep dive that I'm doing, but we'll see. I can foresee myself missing Varney and wanting to get back to it right quick, but we'll see. I've got the second volume to get to. It's just a matter of when I get to it. So one of the reasons I'm not going to get to it right away is because I'm reading this week. I just started this. This is Edgar Rice Burroughs, The Man Who Created Tarzan by Erwin Porges, which is a massive biography of Edgar Rice Burroughs. It's just huge, double columned, but full of illustrations and photographs and all kinds of cool stuff. If you really like Edgar Rice Burroughs, like I do, it's just full of greatness. This gigantic biography, but a little heavy to carry around with you. So this will probably be the big book that I'm reading at home, which is what Varney was. So I'm going to at least finish this before I pick Varney back up. But what did I actually finish this week? So this past week was the last week of New Worlds November, the great reading event created by the Bookish Bryants. And this week was Robots or Artificial Intelligence. And I read this book. I started it last week. So I talked a little bit about it, but I finished this book. Really interesting selection of stories. This is from the 1950s, edited by Groff Conklin, full of stories about robots and computers, at least as they were imagined back in the mid-1950s. And some of the stories were really good. Probably the standouts for me were Skirmish by Clifford D. Samack, which is no surprise because Clifford D. Samack is great. And what else did we have that was interesting? Sam Hall by Paul Anderson was actually pretty good. That was a pretty good story. Then there was Dumbwaiter by Walter M. Miller Jr., which was a really good story, but the main character was such a jerk that, I just wanted him to get killed by robots, but that didn't happen. But it was a good story, just the main character was a jerk. But altogether, this was a really interesting collection of stories, and I thought it was an excellent way to close out New Worlds November. Of course, there are still a few days left of November if you're doing this and want to squeeze in another science fiction story or two. But for me, this was the end of New Worlds November, and an excellent one. It was really good. So this is the, what is this? This is the third book I finished for my 500 book challenge, and another book in my vintage science fiction project that I have read. So there you go. Thinking Machines, Science Fiction Thinking Machines by Groff Conklin. So the next thing I did was I started right away with my Edgar Rice Burroughs deep dive. I decided to start this early. I was going to wait till next year, but I thought, you know what, I should just start this right now. Because there's a lot of... Edgar Rice Burroughs wrote a lot of books. They tended to be short, but still, there are a lot of books. So I started early, and I started with Edgar Rice Burroughs' Master of Adventure by Richard A. Lupoff, a book I have spoken about before. This is a book about the fiction of Edgar Rice Burroughs, an examination of his fiction. And it's really interesting. Lupoff has some interesting perspectives and ideas about these stories, these novels. And he takes them seriously. He takes Edgar Rice Burroughs seriously, which I appreciate. So, an excellent book. If you ever have a chance to pick it up and are interested, I highly recommend it. So this was the 4th book in my 500 book challenge. So 4 books down. Moving right along. No problem. I'll be done any minute. So since I finished that, I started on this. This is Edgar Rice Burroughs' first novel, A Princess of Mars. And I love this Michael Whelan cover. It's fantastic. I think this is the perfect visual representation of the story. And I'm enjoying this just as much as I always do when I read this book. This is a book I've read a few times. And I'm enjoying it just as much now as ever. A Princess of Mars by Edgar Rice Burroughs, the first novel that Edgar Rice Burroughs wrote. So this is cool. And next, after that, I'll be reading The Outlaw of Torn. The Outlaw of Torn. This is an historical novel by Edgar Rice Burroughs, which he did not sell right away. It's a good book, but not a great book. But the next book that he wrote was Tarzan. So that is when he became super famous. And after that, he could just sell anything that he had. And so he sold this. So this was, even though this was the second book that he wrote, it wasn't published until much later. But this also has a fantastic Frank Frazetta cover. Frank Frazetta, man, does some of the greatest covers you'll ever see on a book. And this one is fantastic. Just a gorgeous cover for The Outlaw of Torn. And I haven't read this one in years. Probably not since I was 17, maybe, or 18. So this will be a whole new experience for me since now I'm elderly and I see things quite differently than I used to back in the olden days. So yeah, Outlaw of Torn. Should finish this up in a couple of days. And this one might take me a while just because it is so huge. It is very, very big, but completely awesome. And it's full of cool illustrations like that. That is The Land That Time Forgot, right? Yeah. February. What year? February 1927. Amazing stories. There were a lot of good stuff in that magazine. You got H.G. Wells in there. Yeah, that would have been a good one to read. And that has The Land That Time Forgot, obviously. And this is really interesting so far. I literally just started it this morning. Really good introduction by Ray Bradbury. So that was cool. This is going to be great. I can already tell. I did read this once before, but I was a teenager reading it in the San Leandro Public Library. So again, it should be a whole new experience for me. And I guess that's it. That's everything I've read, and that's what I'm going to read this week. Hopefully this week I will have plenty of time to read. What else is coming up on the channel? I haven't thought that far ahead. I really don't know. I can't tell you. It'll be a surprise to both of us. Okay, guys, I will catch you next time.